Internet governance is the development and application of shared principles, norms, rules, decision-making procedures, and programs that shape the evolution and use of the Internet. This article describes how the Internet was and is currently governed, some of the controversies that occurred along the way, and the ongoing debates about how the Internet should or should not be governed in the future. Internet governance should not be confused with e-governance, which refers to governments' use of technology to carry out their governing duties. Background: no one person, company, organization or government runs the Internet. It is a globally distributed network comprising many voluntarily interconnected autonomous networks. It operates without a central governing body, with each constituent network setting and enforcing its own policies. Its governance is conducted by a decentralized and international multi-stakeholder network of interconnected autonomous groups drawing from civil society, the private sector, governments, the academic and research communities, and national and international organizations. They work cooperatively from their respective roles to create shared policies and standards that maintain the Internet's global interoperability for the public good. However, to help ensure interoperability, several key technical and policy aspects of the underlying core infrastructure and the principal namespaces are administered by the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, which is headquartered in Los Angeles, California. ICANN oversees the assignment of globally unique identifiers on the Internet, including domain names, Internet protocol addresses, application port numbers in the transport protocols, and many other parameters. This seeks to create a globally unified namespace to ensure the global reach of the Internet. ICANN is governed by an international board of directors drawn from across the Internet's technical, business, academic, and other non-commercial communities. However, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, an agency of the U.S. Department of Commerce, continues to have final approval over changes to the DNS root zone. This authority over the root zone file makes ICANN one of a few bodies with global, centralized influence over the otherwise distributed Internet. In the 30th September 2009 affirmation of commitments by the Department of Commerce and ICANN, the Department of Commerce finally affirmed that a private coordinating processor is best able to flexibly meet the changing needs of the Internet and of Internet users. While ICANN itself interpreted this as a declaration of its independence, scholars still point out that this is not yet the case. Considering that the U.S. Department of Commerce can unilaterally terminate the affirmation of commitments with ICANN, the authority of DNS administration is likewise seen as revocable and derived from a single state, namely the United States. The technical underpinning and standardization of the Internet's core protocols is an activity of the Internet Engineering Task Force, a non-profit organization of loosely affiliated international participants that anyone may associate with by contributing technical expertise. On November 16, 2005, the United Nations-sponsored World Summit on the Information Society, held in Tunis, established the Internet Governance Forum to open an ongoing, non-binding conversation among multiple stakeholders about the future of Internet governance. Since WSIS, the term Internet governance has been broadened beyond narrow technical concerns to include a wider range of Internet-related policy issues. Definition: the definition of Internet governance has been contested by differing groups across political and ideological lines. One of the main debates concerns the authority and participation of certain actors, such as national governments, corporate entities and civil society, to play a role in the Internet's governance. A working group established after a UN-initiated World Summit on the Information Society proposed the following definition of Internet governance as part of its June 2005 report: Internet governance is the development and application by governments, the private sector and civil society, in their respective roles, of shared principles, norms, rules, decision-making procedures, and programs that shape the evolution and use of the Internet. Law professor J. Binkler developed a conceptualization of Internet governance by the idea of three layers of governance: physical infrastructure layer, code or logical layer, content layer, Professors Jovan Kurbalik and Laura Donadis also offer comprehensive definitions to Internet governance. According to Kurbalik, the broad approach to Internet governance goes beyond Internet infrastructural aspects and address other legal, economic, developmental, and sociocultural issues. Along similar lines, Donadis argues that Internet governance generally refers to policy and technical coordination issues related to the exchange of information over the Internet. One of the more policy-relevant questions today is exactly whether the regulatory responses are appropriate to police the content delivered through the Internet. It includes important rules for the improvement of Internet safety and for dealing with threats such as cyberbullying, copyright infringement, data protection and other illegal or disruptive activities. History. To understand how the Internet is managed today, it is necessary to know a little of its history. The original ARPANET is one of the components which eventually evolved to become the Internet. As its name suggests, the ARPANET was sponsored by the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency within the U.S. Department of Defense. During the development of ARPANET, a numbered series of requests for comments memos documented technical decisions and methods of working as they evolved. The standards of today's Internet are still documented by RFCs. Between 1984 and 1986 the U.S. National Science Foundation created the NSF-NET backbone, using TCP/IP, to connect their supercomputing facilities. NSF-NET became a general-purpose research network, a hub to connect the supercomputing centers to each other and to the regional research and education networks that would in turn connect campus networks. The combined networks became generally known as the Internet. By the end of 1989, Australia, Germany, Israel, Italy, Japan, Mexico, the Netherlands, New Zealand, and the UK were connected to the Internet, which had grown to contain more than 160,000 hosts. In 1990, the ARPANET was formally terminated. In 1991 the NSF began to relax its restrictions on commercial use on NSF-NET and commercial network providers began to interconnect. The final restrictions on carrying commercial traffic ended on April 30, 1995, when the NSF ended its sponsorship of the NSF-NET backbone service and the service ended. Today almost all Internet infrastructure in the United States, and large portion in other countries, is provided and owned by the private sector. Traffic is exchanged between these networks, at major interconnection points, in accordance with established Internet standards and commercial agreements. Governors. During 1979 the Internet Configuration Control Board was founded by DARPA to oversee the network's development. During 1984 it was renamed the Internet Advisory Board, and during 1986 it became the Internet Activities Board. The Internet Engineering Task Force was formed during 1986 by the U.S. government to develop and promote Internet standards. It consisted initially of researchers, but by the end of the year participation was available to anyone, and its business was performed largely by email. From the early days of the network until his death during 1998, John Postal oversaw address allocation and other Internet protocol numbering and assignments in his capacity as director of the Computer Networks Division at the Information Sciences Institute of the University of Southern California, under a contract from the Department of Defense. This function eventually became known as the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, and as it expanded to include management of the global domain name system root servers, a small organization grew. Postal also served as RFC editor. Allocation of IP addresses was delegated to 5 regional Internet registries: American Registry for Internet Numbers for North America, RA Copyright So IP Europa Copyright INS, Network Coordination Center for Europe, the Middle East, and Central Asia, Asia Pacific Network Information Center for Asia and the Pacific region, Latin American and Caribbean Internet Addresses Registry for Latin America and the Caribbean region. African Network Information Center was created in 2004 to manage allocations for Africa. After John Postal's death in 1998, IANA became part of ICANN, a California non-profit established in September 1998 by the U.S. government and awarded a contract by the U.S. Department of Commerce. Initially 2 board members were elected by the Internet community at large, though this was changed by the rest of the board in 2002 in a poorly attended public meeting in Accra, Ghana. In 1992 the Internet Society was founded, with a mission to assure the open development, evolution and use of the Internet for the benefit of all people throughout the world. Its members include individuals as well as corporations, organizations, governments, and universities. The IAB was renamed the Internet Architecture Board, and became part of ISOC. The Internet Engineering Task Force also became part of the ISOC. The IETF is overseen currently by the Internet Engineering Steering Group, and longer-term research is carried on by the Internet Research Task Force and overseen by the Internet Research Steering Group. At the first World Summit on the Information Society in Geneva in 2003, the topic of Internet governance was discussed. ICANN's status as a private corporation under contract to the U.S. government created controversy among other governments, especially Brazil, China, South Africa, and some Arab states. Since no general agreement existed even on the definition of what comprised Internet governance, United Nations Secretary-General Kofi Annan initiated a working group on Internet governance to clarify the issues and report before the second part of the World Summit on the Information Society in Tunis 2005. After much controversial debate, during which the U.S. delegation refused to consider surrendering the U.S. control of the root zone file, participants agreed on a compromise to allow for wider international debate on the policy principles. They agreed to establish an Internet Governance Forum, to be convened by the United Nations Secretary-General before the end of the second quarter of 2006. The Greek government volunteered to host the first such meeting. Globalization and governance controversy. Role of ICANN and the U.S. Department of Commerce. The position of the U.S. Department of Commerce as the controller of some aspects of the Internet gradually attracted criticism from those who felt that control should be more international. A hands-off philosophy by the Department of Commerce helped limit this criticism, but this was undermined in 2005 when the Bush administration intervened to help kill the XXX top-level domain proposal, and, much more severely, following the 2013 disclosures of mass surveillance by the U.S. government. When the IANA functions were handed over to ICANN, a new U.S. non-profit, controversy increased. ICANN's decision-making process was criticized by some observers as being secretive and unaccountable. When the directors' posts which had previously been elected by the at-large community of Internet users were abolished, some feared that ICANN would become illegitimate and its qualifications questionable, due to the fact that it was now losing the aspect of being a neutral governing body. ICANN stated that it was merely streamlining decision-making, and developing a structure suitable for the modern Internet. Other topics of controversy included the creation and control of generic top-level domains, the control of country code domains, recent proposals for a large increase in ICANN's budget and responsibilities, and a proposed domain tax to pay for the increase. There were also suggestions that individual governments should have more control, or that the International Telecommunication Union or the United Nations should have a function in Internet governance. IBSA proposal. One controversial proposal to this effect, resulting from a September 2011 summit between India, Brazil, and South Africa, would seek to move Internet governance into a UN Committee on Internet-related policy. The move was a reaction to a perception that the principles of the 2005 Tunis Agenda for the Information Society have not been met. The statement called for the subordination of independent technical organizations such as ICANN and the ITU to a political organization operating under the auspices of the United Nations. After outrage from India unregistered trademark as civil society and media, the Indian government backed away from the proposal. Montevideo Statement on the Future of Internet Cooperation. On October 7, 2013 the Montevideo Statement on the Future of Internet Cooperation was released by the leaders of a number of organizations involved in coordinating the Internet's global technical infrastructure, loosely known as the I Group. Among other things, The statement expressed strong concern over the undermining of the trust and confidence of Internet users globally due to recent revelations of pervasive monitoring and surveillance, and called for accelerating the globalization of ICANN and IANA functions, towards an environment in which all stakeholders, including all governments, participate on an equal footing. This desire to move away from a United States-centric approach is seen as a reaction to the ongoing NSA surveillance scandal. The statement was signed by the heads of the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, the Internet Engineering Task Force, the Internet Architecture Board, the World Wide Web Consortium, the Internet Society, and the 5 regional Internet address registries. Global Multi-Stakeholder Meeting on the Future of Internet Governance In October 2013, Fodi Chade Copyright, current president and CEO of ICANN, met with Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff in Brasilia. Upon Chade Copyright's invitation, the two announced that Brazil would host an international summit on Internet governance in April 2014. The announcement came after the 2013 disclosures of mass surveillance by the U.S. government, and President Rousseff's speech at the opening session of the 2013 United Nations General Assembly, where she strongly criticized the American surveillance program as a breach of international law. The Global Multi-Stakeholder Meeting on the Future of Internet Governance will include representatives of government, industry, civil society, and academia. At the IGF-8 meeting in Bali in October 2013, a commenter noted that Brazil intends the meeting to be a summit in the sense that it will be high-level with decision-making authority. The organizers of the NET Mundial meeting have decided that an online forum called /1net, set up by the I Group, will be a major conduit of non-governmental input into the 3 committees preparing for the meeting in April. Net Mundial Initiative The Net Mundial Initiative is a plan for international governance of the Internet that was first proposed at the Global Multi-Stakeholder Meeting on the Future of Internet Governance Conference and later developed into the Net Mundial Initiative by ICANN CEO Fodi Chade along with representatives of the World Economic Forum and the Brazilian Internet Steering Committee, commonly referred to as CGIBR. The meeting produced a non-binding statement in favor of consensus-based decision-making. It reflected a compromise and did not harshly condemn mass surveillance or include the words net neutrality, despite initial support for that from Brazil. The final resolution says ICANN should be under international control by September 2015. A minority of governments, including Russia, China, Iran and India, were unhappy with the final resolution and wanted multilateral management for the Internet, rather than broader multi-stakeholder management. A month later, the Panel on Global Internet Cooperation and Governance Mechanisms and the World Economic Forum with assistance from the Annenberg Foundation, supported and included the Net Mundial Statement in its own report. See also, History of the Internet, Internet Law, Internet Organizations, Internet Censorship. Internet Bodies International Organization for Standardization, Maintenance Agency, defines names and postal codes of countries, dependent territories, special areas of geographic significance. To date it has only played a minor role in developing Internet standards. Internet Architecture Board, oversees the technical and engineering development of the IETF and IRTF. Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, coordinates the Internet's systems of unique identifiers, IP addresses, protocol parameter registries, top-level domain space. Performs Internet Assigned Numbers Authority function under agreement with the U.S. Department of Commerce's National Telecommunications and Information Administration. Internet Engineering Task Force, develops and promotes a wide range of Internet standards dealing in particular with standards of the Internet Protocol Suite. Their technical documents influence the way people design, use and manage the Internet. Internet Governance Forum, a multi-stakeholder forum for policy dialogue. Internet Research Task Force, promotes research of the evolution of the Internet by creating focused, long-term research groups working on Internet protocols, applications, architecture, and technology. Internet Network Operators Groups, informal groups established to provide forums for network operators to discuss matters of mutual interest. Internet society assures the open development, evolution, and use of the Internet for the benefit of all people throughout the world. Currently ISOC has over 90 chapters in around 80 countries. Number Resource Organization, established in October 2003, the NRO is an unincorporated organization uniting the 5 regional Internet registries. Regional Internet registries, there are 5 regional Internet registries. They manage the allocation and registration of Internet number resources, such as IP addresses, within geographic regions of the world. World Wide Web Consortium creates standards for the World Wide Web that enable an open web platform, for example, by focusing on issues of accessibility, internationalization, and mobile web solutions. United Nations bodies Internet Governance Forum, IGF Regional, National, and Subject Area Initiatives, Commission on Science and Technology for Development Working Group on Improvements to the IGF, active from February 2011 to May 2012. International Telecommunications Union, World Conference on International Telecommunications, a treaty-level conference facilitated by the ITU to address international telecommunications regulations, held in December 2012 in Dubai. World Summit on the Information Society, summits held in 2003 and 2005. WSIS Forum, annual meetings held in Geneva starting in 2006 as a follow-up of the WSIS Geneva Plan of Action. WSIS Plus 10, a high-level event and extended version of the WSIS Forum to take stock of achievements in the last 10 years and develop proposals for a new vision beyond 2015, held from 13 to April 17, 2014 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Working Group on Internet Governance, active from September 2004 to November 2005. References. Further reading, Roadmap for the Internet of Things, Its Impact, Architecture and Future Governance, by Mark Fell, Kara Copyright and Strauss 2014. Manifesto for Smarter Intervention in Complex Systems, by Mark Fell, Kara Copyright and Strauss 2013. What is Internet Governance? A primer from the Council on Foreign Relations, The Global War for Internet Governance, Laura Donadis, Yale University Press, 2014. Explains global power dynamics around technical and political governance of the Internet. Ruling the Root, Internet Governance and the Taming of Cyberspace by Milton Mueller, MIT Press, 2002. The Definitive Study of DNS and ICANN's Early History. Protocol Politics, Laura Donadis, MIT Press, 2009. IP Addressing and the Migration to IPv6, One History of DNS by Ross W. Rader. April 2001. Article contains historic facts about DNS and explains the reasons behind the so-called DNS war. The Emerging Field of Internet Governance, by Laura Donadis. September 2010. Suggests a framework for understanding problems in Internet governance. Launching the DNS War, .com Privatization and the Rise of Global Internet Governance by Craig Simon. December 2006. PhD dissertation containing an extensive history of events which sparked the so-called DNS war. Habermas at Discourse.net, Toward a Critical Theory of Cyberspace, by A. Michael Frumkin, 116 Hev. L. Rev. 749. Argues that the Internet standards process undertaken by the IETF fulfills JAR 1/4 GEN Habermas's conditions for the best practical discourse. Mueller, Milton L. Networks and States, The Global Politics of Internet Governance. MIT Press. ISBN 978-0-262-01459-5. Dutton, William H. Malcolm Peltu. The Emerging Internet Governance Mosaic, Connecting the Pieces. Information Polity, The International Journal of Government and Democracy in the Information Age 12, 63/81. ISSN 1570-1255. Mort Zayuitz and Christian Pentzold provide an In Search of Internet Governance, Performing Order in Digitally Networked Environments, New Media and Society 16, pages 306–322. An overview of definitions of Internet governance and approaches to its study. External links: APC Internet Rights Charter, Association for Progressive Communications, November 2006, Circle ID, Internet Governance, Diplo Internet Governance Community, Electronic Frontier Foundation, website, The Future of Global Internet Governance, Institute of Informatics and Telematics, Consiglio Nazionale Ricerca, Pisa, Global Internet Governance Academic Network, ICANN, Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, Internet Governance Forum, Internet Governance Project, Internet Society, website, The Politics and Issues of Internet Governance, Milton L. Muir, April 2007, analysis from the Institute of Research and Debate on Governance, United States cedes control of the Internet, but what now? Review of an Extraordinary Meeting, Kieran McCarthy, The Register, July 27, 2006, World Summit on the Information Society, Geneva 2003 and Tunis 2005, /OneNet Discussion Group.